Okay. Breaking the ice. Hi, welcome back to my channel. It is called Allie's Big Toe. Toe stands for Theory of Everything. But we are talking about Jehovah's Witnesses and leaving the Watchtower, and I am here today with my 74-year-old mother. Her name is Sheryl with an S, and I came here today with the list of all of your questions from YouTube, but when I arrived at my mom's house, I was greeted with a theocratic ministry school talk. So we are both control freaks, and because she is older and wiser and my mother, I'm just going to read the questions and her questions, and I'm not going to let her read the answers. And then I think in a separate video, we'll get strictly to your questions. Okay. Perhaps you met my mom in a recent video of mine. Several of you expressed an interest in hearing more of her story. Her name is Sheryl. She was a baptized enthusiastic, I feel like I'm 10 years old, at the theocratic ministry school. If you're triggered, I'm sorry.
It's okay, dear.
Okay. Okay, 1 year ago, you stopped going out in field service. And in April of 2019, you attended the very last meeting at your Kingdom Hall, and you've been a baptized Jehovah's Witness uninterrupted, meaning no judicial action, correct?
True.
You've never been anything?
No.
Oh.
Called into a back room a couple times.
Okay.
Unofficially.
Unofficially. Well, we'll get there. I think people want to know what prompted these life-changing decisions and why are you speaking out about them now?
Well, you know that you've asked me many times to go public because I have had a long history in the organization. And
why are you speaking out now? I'm taking away the notes. Why now?
Because nobody's been asking me why I left. And they should be asking me. I was among them for decades. And I want to explain myself. I'm not worried about being viewed as some wicked person, but nor do I want to be viewed as a weak person. My faith is still very strong.
I think I remember coming over here a couple weeks ago. Yeah, you said here in your notes, February 2020 was a turning point, and what scripture kind of incited you to speak out?
Early in February, I just all of a sudden thought of Jeremiah, and he said he couldn't hold it in anymore. This is one of the hardest things about being removed from the congregation. I like to talk, and I couldn't talk to anybody. They didn't want to hear it.
Yeah, and we were trained to give a witness, but it's ironic that when you want to give a witness about an organization and its history unwhitewashed, where's your Animal Farm book? Well, anyway, then you're not supposed to witness. Okay, so let's talk about your religious history. Were you born into Jehovah's Witnesses?
No, I wasn't. The first meeting I went to was in a private home, and we met in the basement that was filled with many, many chairs, and I was sitting next to, I was 10 years old. I said that?
10.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And my whole family went, but I was sitting also next to a young woman, and she raised her hand and answered a question from the Watchtower, and I leaned over and said, "Do it again." And she did. And I was intrigued. I was excited. And that was the beginning of my immersion into the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses.
What religion were your parents before?
My mom was Lutheran. My dad was Baptist. I remember that we 4 kids went to the Lutheran Sunday school. I don't remember my parents attending.
Oh, your parents didn't attend church?
No.
So your mom and dad started studying together?
They did. It was my father's interest. He really wanted to do it, probably because his older brother was already one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh.
And my mother simply decided to do it to prove the witnesses wrong. And we kids were dragged in from playtime outside on Monday nights And so the six of us studied with two Jehovah's Witness men. It was often very deep, and
what year are we talking?
well, I was 10, so it was 1955.
Okay. When were you baptized?
In 1958, in April.
And David Wickland would like to know where.
I was baptized in the Ashland Boulevard Auditorium in Chicago.
Cool. Okay, so I guess I'm going to switch off the script because I had some questions that I don't even know the answers to about the transition from just being a non-JW little young girl to being a Jehovah's Witness. I can't find my questions.
I have a manuscript.
Do you feel like your personality changed when, like, at that point? So you're 10.
No, our whole family was very gregarious and outgoing. And so it was really pretty easy for us to go to doors and start up conversations with strangers. And I remember, even though those Bible studies were often boring for us, I must have gotten something out of them because I remember going, I started talking to my friends about Bible topics.
Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Did you start preaching at school?
Yes. In fact, when I was in 8th grade, at age 13, I did a term paper on, are you afraid of hell? And that caused a little stir in the school.
No, but you better be afraid of Armageddon.
So then I remember age 13, I was out in the ministry and talking to a man who obviously knew more about the Bible than me. And in my frustration, I said, well, we might not get everything right, but we're out here preaching. That was pretty revealing.
Well, that's actually exactly what the JW who I talked to in Mexico said. Because he was giving like the whole bullet points of why this is the God's organization, and he said, we're the only ones who go to your door. You didn't seek out us at our door. Jeffrey, it's the cat. Pick her up. Okay, at what point did you start pioneering? Oh, so just to backtrack a little bit, you liked preaching in school.
Yeah, I did.
Did you look at your classmates like they're going to die at Armageddon if
No,
they don't accept a Bible study?
I didn't. I just had some really interesting things to share, and I knew that most of them didn't know much about the Bible, and so I felt pretty confident that I could share something with them.
Okay. At what point did you start pioneering?
Right after I graduated from high school, and that's when I went to Batavia, Illinois. It was only 30 miles from our home congregation. My sister and I wanted to serve where the need was greater. And so we moved to this congregation, and for, I think it was almost 2 years, we lived with a very dear family of witnesses who were 5 at the time, 5 in number. That soon increased to 6. So then we got an apartment and asked 2 other Jehovah's Witness girls from our home congregation to come pioneer with us and share the expenses.
So how did you end up in Wisconsin?
My sister and I both applied for special pioneering, and we were assigned to Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
And then you met Dad, who's right there. Sorry. I'm going to skip those questions. Did you have a lot of results in your ministry? How many Bible studies do you think you've conducted in your 61 years being a Jehovah's Witness?
Hundreds, literally hundreds. And 33 advanced to the point of baptism.
33.
Yeah. And so I had 20 years in the pioneer work, both regular and special, and many more years as an auxiliary, not continuous. And I did have success in the ministry, and now I kind of wonder I have some regrets about that.
Have you reached out to any of them?
Yes, only 2 have really reached out to me. And then when I explained myself a little bit, there was no more conversation.
Thought-stopping techniques and pre-shunning.
Well, it really revolved around I made it obvious that I was no longer trusting the organization.
Okay, well that's a good segue into like the questions I have for you. And she doesn't even know what I'm going to ask her, so we can always delete this and start over. So let's just roll with it, right?
Okay, daughter.
Actually, let me just see if this thing is even recording, so hang on.
It's time to put on makeup. It's time to dress up right. It's time
It looks like it is.
to pop it show tonight. What?
I'm sorry. I am so not into technology. Okay, so I mean, when I was taking notes, kind of preparing for this a little bit, obviously I really do thank you for doing this, because
I'm still worried about a couple members of my family being more turned off.
if they watch it, which they probably won't, but just hearing that you've done it.
Yeah, kind of like when you were in the newspaper and then my brother-in-law had to distribute all those newspapers in his area with your face on the front cover.
Yeah. Well, let's just talk about it. So your brother-in-law, obviously married to your sister, who you would have said forever was your best friend, right? Mm-hmm. You're only how many years apart?
Less than 2. She's
Yeah.
older.
And they look like twins. So like when we would go to regional conventions or circuit assemblies or whatever, everybody would come up to her and say, oh, it's, and I'm not going to say her name, but yeah.
Oh, they'd say, hi, so-and-so, and it wasn't me, but I just waved and said hi to save her reputation, her friendly reputation.
When's the last time you saw her?
Wow, I think it's been 6 months.
If she is watching this, what would you like to say to her? Look in the camera.
Truth can withstand scrutiny, and if we weren't taught the whole truth, we should be finding out why not.
And keep knocking, keep searching, and don't shun in the process. Love you. Okay.
I do love you.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, the questions I was going to ask you before we sat down, which I didn't, is am I pressuring you to do this?
Oh, you were in the past. I wasn't ready. I'm ready.
Am I your new cult leader?
No.
I've been called that. And okay. Oh, there perhaps maybe hundreds or maybe even thousands of people who will watch this video, which is like a small convention. So we should probably establish like a donation arrangement. If you are from an English speaking congregation, it's $10 per person. But if you're from a Spanish speaking convention, it's $5 per person.
You're so naughty.
I know. Okay, let's roll. Okay. Question from Cindy Lou Who. Hi. What research did you do? Let's put a time frame. So before, do you remember when we went out to breakfast at Whispering Orchards and I showed up? I was really nervous. So this would have been like 2015. And we showed up at breakfast and I announced that I was going to read Crisis of Conscience. And I hadn't started reading it yet, but I didn't want to do it in secret because I honestly was afraid that it was like associated with demons and that it could create like a portal to demons. And so I didn't want to do it alone. And do you remember the thing I specifically said to you? If you notice any change in my behavior or personality, intervene while I'm reading this book.
I do remember that.
And how did you feel when I told you I was going to read the book?
Very nervous. But not as nervous as when your father brought the book home from the library in the early 80s.
Yep. Which is
And-
why she knew about the book.
And I thought to myself, how dare you? This is an apostate you're listening to, letting affect you, influence you. But my curiosity got the best of me back then in the early 80s, and you were a toddler. And I read only one chapter. It was called Double Standards. And that meant so much to me because at the time that the Malawian brothers were being persecuted so horrifically, I was following it very carefully in the Watchtower and Awake articles. It was a big issue.
I remember being a little kid and praying for Mali because I didn't understand.
Oh, that's right.
I didn't understand Malawi, but I remember sitting in the Kingdom Hall saying, "Help the brothers and sisters in Mali." You know.
I do remember that. Oh, that was sweet. Okay. So Winston pointed out recently that the society had a film on the persecution, and it was so weak compared to what really happened. Bicycle spokes were being stabbed into their legs. Women were gang raped. Houses were burned down. And then so many had to flee to another country and live in refugee camps. So when I permitted myself to read that one chapter in Crisis of Conscience, it brought all of that back to me, and I was sickened all over again. Even more so because in the book, Raymond Franz, a former member of the governing body, pointed out that at about that same time, the branch office in Mexico had written to the headquarters in New York about what they should do regarding Christian neutrality, because that was the big issue in Mexico, because it was the common practice for people to bribe Mexican officials so they could get a card that would be filled out saying that they had completed the training or requirements for military service. Mm-hmm. And the reason why that was an important card is because they got them better jobs and passports.
Mm-hmm. So you read that when I was a toddler, and I guess what you've said to me before is she read this 38 years ago, because a lot of people are like, oh, when did the seeds of doubt start happening? They started happening years ago, but like you've said, you were busy with a little kid.
At that time, I went into a slight depression. I thought, how can this be true? But it's there, it's documented, and that's...
So how'd you stuff it down?
Well, I was busy. I was busy with you. You were a challenging little kid.
A colicky baby. Okay, so when I told you I'm reading this book and then I went through my waking up process, what was the first thing you started researching? Like, what was it that gave you permission to start researching?
Gave me permission. I don't know, you kept encouraging me to read Crisis of Conscience also. I kept resisting, but you said it's so well documented, Mom. It's there. And so that book really changed my life. I've read it through 3 times.
And then what about the day you came home from field service and Dad was watching YouTube?
Oh, no, it wasn't field service. It was at night. I came home from a meeting, and there was Jeffrey Jackson on the TV. And I sat right down. Okay, got to listen to this. It was the Australian Royal Commission.
They all know about it, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. So when he was asked, are you the only channel of communication between God and man? And he definitely stumbled on that and finally said, well, I think it would be presumptuous of me to say that we are the only channel of communication. And I'm thinking, presumptuous? We're the true religion, aren't we?
But isn't it interesting that I didn't tell you to watch the Australian Royal Commission?
That's true, you didn't. That was totally an accident that I ended up watching that. And then shortly thereafter, I saw the print out from the London newspaper from The Guardian saying that Jehovah's Witnesses had been a member of the United Nations as a non-governmental organization. And again, I'm thinking, I thought we were strictly neutral.
Yeah. So that's when you really started researching.
I did.
Okay.
And I have to mention at that point that I started watching, I just dove in. I needed answers. And Berean Pickett's was...
Well, before that channel, Lloyd Evans, right? John Cedars.
No.
No?
No.
Berean Pickett's?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, thank you both. How many years do you feel like it took you to wake up? This is still from Cindy.
Well, I resisted your appearances in the house with all kinds of questions and challenges for my brain for a good year. I had some clever Watchtower answers to give you for a while. So a good year I resisted. And then even when I was learning things and found great peace in some of the things I was learning, I still thought I could be wrong.
Well, I also think part of the hiccup, this is just jogging my memory, when I first was doing my own research, I kind of had a little detour into a Watchtower apologetics group. And so I was coming over here because I kind of became obsessed with the prophetic books, and that wasn't...
That didn't grab me.
Yeah.
I started reading one of the books and I thought,
Yeah.
didn't want that.
Cool. All right. And Cindy's last question is, what convinced you to give yourself permission to separate from the organization?
I think it was the memorial campaign early last year. The year before, I had been an auxiliary pioneer for 2 months. You know how you can get that.
Only 30 hours, and
Yeah,
you can have
prestige.
the privilege of meeting with the circuit overseer.
There you go. Okay, so I'm thinking, how can I go out anymore and invite people to this commemoration of Christ's death, where he gives his body and blood with the symbols, and then discourage them from taking it? I thought... I had thought about that at the time, years ago. This is strange, but then I thought, I can't participate anymore. That was the end of my door-to-door ministry.
Okay. But yet when I started partaking in 2016, how did you feel?
I thought it was your personal decision.
But you didn't think that it was an invitation for anybody who believed in Jesus?
No, because you were kind of rude. You said, "Are you a Christian?" What do you think I am, daughter?
Because I was, Christian, Christos, anointed, because Jehovah's Witnesses have this whole theology that anointed only applies to like this special class. So that's why I asked the question. All right, moving on from Constellation Pegasus. Rutherford admitted that 1914 and 1925 brought humiliation and reproach. People quit their jobs, etc. How can the organization get away with that when you consider Deuteronomy 18:12-22?
That is such a good question, because I knew Deuteronomy 18, the identification of a false prophet. But I read the reasoning book. And
Does it say don't be afraid of him, or does it actually say kill him?
I think afraid, but I'm not positive.
Okay.
But I read the reasoning book, Are We False Prophets? And it was convincing to me at the time. It sounded reasonable that...
There's a chapter in the reasoning book that says, are we false prophets?
There's a bullet point.
Oh.
And it was, no, we're just zealous. We're keeping alert to...
If a dog barks at midnight to wake you up and no one's there, are you going to kill the dog?
Shoot him.
Shoot him? No, but put a muzzle on him. Okay, how do you feel about 19... Are we done with that one?
Yeah.
Okay, how do you feel about 1975 and... First that, and then the overlapping generation.
No, I want to do the overlapping generation first. It was nonsense from the get-go.
If that's not waking up Jehovah's Witnesses, the overlapping generation, like the zealous ones, I don't know.
Well, even one who is right now shunning me when we were close friends said, "Oh, that nonsense." Mm-hmm. Overlapping anointed generation.
Or like one of my friends, when that purple book came out, I don't even know the name of it. The purple book.
God's kingdom comes. God's kingdom something.
It's the abbreviated, whitewashed version of the Proclaimer's book. And so when I was reading over that chapter about the overlapping generation with David Splain's little graph, I called my friend. I'm like, does this make any sense to you? Because I was trying to get her to think. And her response was, girl, I read that. She said, no, but girl, after I read it 10 times, now I get it. And it was like, yeah, that is how indoctrination and brain working work. Repetition.
We did learn scriptures. I did become a good Bible teacher, but there were so many things where you really had to memorize the wording of the Watchtower to be able to explain something.
Okay, so now let's talk about 1975. How old were you in 1975?
30.
And did you think Armageddon was going to come?
Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes.
But surely you were just getting that because of your own thoughts, not from the Watchtower.
Ha 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 ha. I remember talking about this with my mother, and it was so real to us that we discussed, we probably won't have to buy another car. Maybe not even another slip or a girdle. Yeah, we wore girdles back then. And it was, and I remember personally hearing the brother speak from the platform and say, only 90 months left till Armageddon.
Oh, that's years before.
Yeah. Well, the Red Book on which that information is based came out in 1966. Freedom of the Sons of God. Everlasting Life and Freedom of the Sons of God. So that was 1966, and it had a chart when 6,000 years of man's existence would have culminated in 1975. So then that left room for the 1,000 years of the millennium. That was so exciting.
So what happened, like you said you were talking about it with your mom. What happened January 1976 when it didn't happen? Like, what did y'all say to each other? Or did you not talk about it?
I just checked my journals. January 1976, I stopped pioneering.
Oh.
It was coincidental. I didn't specifically say, okay, they were wrong, so I'm quitting pioneering. Supposedly it was for health reasons. But I was disenchanted.
And you know, I was born in 1979. That's one of the reasons why you didn't have kids, right?
Yeah.
So I guess I should be grateful for like 1975 because you would have had kids before me and then I wouldn't be here. So
That's absolutely right. No, that's absolutely
always
right.
find the silver lining.
In fact, it was in 78 that we bought our first very small house. Our thinking, the urgency lessened, no doubt. But meanwhile, in 1964, my parents sold their bakery, sold their house, went pioneering, and eventually ended up in the circuit work.
Tell them your last name.
My last name is Sovereign.
Well, was, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So like when the circuit overseer would come through, Brother Sovereign is coming for the...
It was
a fun fact. Or
trivia.
Trivia. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll pause the video and do another part. How does that sound? This is from Dimity Long. What did you think of the organization? Oh, wait. Rewind real quick. So mentally you were still sort of in 2016, correct?
Yes.
And so when you were at that convention,